first thing, your mind was chaotic when bankruptcy happened. From your past experience, that you've had moments where you've always overcame. You've always like leaving home at 16 years old.
What I did immediately after the personal bankruptcy was decide to do a fitness competition. What it did was it dialed in my discipline and it made me focus on something else that I knew was going to take my attention away from all the shitty stuff that was happening. So I needed some alone time, which was it was good for that. And then I needed to have a goal. It was an easy goal, I think. You know what I mean? Like I can control all the variables. I can control what I eat. I can pick the people that I put around me to help me do this thing, you know, get the right coach, get the right dietitian, all this stuff. But what it did is it kind of just like refocused me on something that I saw as like an easy win. Does that make sense?
Wow.
So I could do this thing. I could feel good about myself, you know, rebuild confidence. Looking back at the past years that I've built the most recent businesses, there's been some aspects of those businesses where I've been so focused on doing something that I've neglected my health.
Yeah.
And I can see how negative that is now. I see how important the physical aspect of it was. And now I've made that a cornerstone of what it is that I do today because it puts me in the right headspace. And physically, you know, you can take on more stress.
In the middle of bankruptcy, a lot of chaos going on, he decided to get in shape, focus on one goal, limit his distraction, improve his discipline, and plus feeling good helps him mentally and physically, and he created small momentum with what he could control. That was a bar. Hey guys, welcome to the Mind of a CEO podcast. And today we have an amazing guest, Steve Fader. His story is nothing like I've ever heard before. It's pretty much from a movie. Steve went from getting out of his house at 16 years old, was an EMT, a firefighter, an MMA fighter, a fight promoter, went bankrupt, made a lot of money, and aside from all of those amazing successes, he's been married for 10 years to his beautiful wife, Crystal, and is a big advocate for fitness and men's mental health. Guys, would like to welcome you, Steve, brother. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming to the show, right, and sitting with us. But why don't you just jump right into it, okay? Let's hear from the horse's mouth. Tell us about your story. How did it all start?
Yeah, I mean, I guess from a young age, I always understood that I was kind of destined to do something a little bit bigger. And I grew up on a horse farm in rural Manitoba. So we grew up kind of, you know, out in the middle of nowhere. I knew that, you know, by the midway point of my teens that I wanted to leave where I was. And I knew that I wanted to move somewhere where there was more people, more opportunity. I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do. You know, from an educational perspective, I wasn't prepared to go through some type of like, you know, formal post-secondary education. And my mother growing up, she was an emergency nurse. And I always thought, you know, it's an admirable job. I feel like she got to help people. So what sparked the EMT firefighter aspect of my choice to move into that career was her. So emergency services I was kind of drawn to because I was, you know, physically fit. You know, I understood a little bit about how a firefighter worked, and you know, so I thought it would be a cool job when I was younger.
Oh yeah.
You know, that sounds pretty cliche that a kid wants to be a firefighter, but you know, once I moved from Manitoba to Alberta, you know, Calgary was very overwhelming. There's a lot more people here. Obviously, you know, the city was 1 million plus people, and you know, just driving on the highway was a little bit intimidating. And you know, where am I going to live? How am I going to make money? You know, to the story that we shared before about the busboy job that I got, which was my first job in the city. You know, it was hard the first couple years that I lived here. I didn't know anybody. You know, there was no socializing really. It was just kind of, you know, I would work, go home, work, go to school, work, go home, and then I realized that what I was doing wasn't making enough money. So I decided to kind of look out into the world to find out whether or not I could get another job that could make me some more money. And at the time, Calgary was growing pretty aggressively. So the construction industry, as it is today, was pretty big here.
Yeah.
So I got on a framing crew, and I'd never done anything like that before. So I was basically just a mule, basically, right? I was the guy that was humping lumber and, you know, learning the tricks of the trade and understanding how to become a framer.
Yeah.
It was a bad experience within that first kind of endeavor. I ended up working for a guy that was addicted to crack, which was my first experience with any type of illicit drugs like that. Growing up on a farm, you're not really exposed to that type of thing. It was a real big culture shock for me moving to the city. But as I started to learn a little bit more about how the world worked, being exposed to these new things, I understood that there was an opportunity for me to make more money. And, I needed to do that in a way where I could still chase what I wanted to do from a career perspective, but also in the meantime, kind of pay the bills and keep myself fed and all that kind of stuff. So, of course. A friend of mine from high school actually got a job working on the oil rigs, and he suggested to me, maybe you should take a look at trying to get a job on an oil rig. So I was like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So I went to Red Deer, had my first interview, got hired on the spot, as was the case in those years. They just hired whoever was a warm body, right? And on my way out to the first rig, the trailer tells me, "Have you ever seen a rig before?" And I was like, "Nope." And he goes, "Okay, well, when the tool push asks you if you've ever seen a rig before, just tell him you watched the movie Armageddon." He's like, "You'll be all right."
All right.
Anyways, it was a rough couple of years. It was a good job. You learn a lot about working hard and being in the cold and making money. And, it was a ridiculous amount of money they were paying people to work out there, which was good because I was good at that. I was good at working hard, right? So I could show up on time. I could work really hard, go home, sleep, get up the next day and do it over again. So that I parlayed the oil field career into, I eventually got accepted into fire school. So I went to fire school for a year. It was a 12-month program. And then,
sorry for cutting you off.
No.
So when you were in the oil rig, what made you think, I still want to go into fire school?
Well, that was always my goal, right? And for me to have to make the money to be able to pay for school and all that kind of stuff, I needed to find a way to be able to earn. And then, it was easy to go back to. So in years after fire school, I spent 2 months working on a full-time on a department in northern Saskatchewan and realized, maybe this isn't the job for me. And it was an easy go back to the rigs because I could just go back into the position I was in before. I knew how much money I was going to make. It was a significant amount of money at the time. So I moved into that pretty easily. I moved in and out of the oil field probably a couple times through a 8 or 9 year period. And then, as is the case with anybody, you got personal relationships. So, I date a girl in this city. I'm here. I'm away from home all the time. And so I kind of jumped around Alberta for a couple of years. So I was in Edmonton for a bit. I was in Red Deer for a bit. I was in Calgary for a bit. Ultimately ended up coming back to Calgary. The story kind of gets a little bit complicated from there. I had trained Muay Thai for, from when I was 13 or 14 until I left home. So when I left Manitoba, I was 18, left home at 16. So I spent some years in my final high school years, rented a place, stayed with some friends, kind of just jumped around. But I stayed training the entire time. And when I came to Alberta, I was like, oh, this will be a good way to meet people. I'll go train at one of these gyms.
Yeah. And
so, I jumped around gyms here in town and I ended up landing at one that ended up being the gym that I stayed at, that I ended up fighting out of. And so, in mid 2000s, I had kind of given up the firefighting dream and I was like, I got to do something else. So I came back to Calgary. I started a construction company with one of the guys I went to fire school with. Actually, he had kind of a side gig going. And so he worked as a firefighter and he had this contracting company. So he taught me finished carpentry and a bunch of other stuff. And I ended up kind of branching off and doing my own thing. So in 2007, I got an idea while I was working construction that I wanted to start my own business. So this was kind of like the first version of, Stevie does the business thing.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I liked mixed martial arts. I knew I liked the branding aspect. I liked creating things. Growing up, I was very artistic. I would draw lots. I kind of, I went away from that in my early 20s. And then as I got into the mid 2000s, I thought, oh, this will be an opportunity for me to maybe start drawing again, maybe do some design stuff. And then merchandising was the business that I got into.
Yeah.
So the clothing company that I created was meant to accent the fight organizations that were putting on professional shows throughout Western Canada. So it was a merchandising company specific to MMA stuff. So we would go set up kind of pop-up shops and sell merchandise. And it made me more money than I thought it was going to, which was kind of surprising. So I was like, oh, maybe there's this thing that I could do on the side. On the construction, I could make some more money doing this. So as I was fighting, we would also be selling merchandise. I made more money selling the merchandise than I did ever fighting because they don't pay professional fighters well in the mid 2000s. I don't even know if they do anymore still. Yeah, so after that, I got the idea that I was going to start a live fight promotion. And I would compete with some of the shows that I was selling merchandise at because I thought as a fighter, you get to see the inner workings of all these different fight organizations, and you understand the people who are running them. You understand how they're run, and they were run, in my opinion, not knowing anything about business, poorly. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try this thing because I think that I could probably do this better. And then it was kind of a fast track to understanding how to build a business, how to raise money, where's the money coming from. And the bankruptcy that you mentioned, I
didn't mean to put you on blast like that. You know what I mean?
It's a bit of a point of pride for me, to be honest with you. Not knowing how to run the business and having to learn, by making mistakes was probably one of the most valuable things I've ever done. And by that, I mean, I was working in the construction company and I was funneling all of the money from the construction company in to try and make this business a reality. And in turn, I wasn't paying the CRA and there was trouble. I'm just was trying to kite money back and forth to make sure things worked. And in my mind, it was, I'm going to take this money, I'm going to make this business work. And then ultimately I'll be able to go back, erase this mistake that I know I've made willingly. And hopefully this will be successful. And unfortunately, as is the case with any new entrepreneur, I failed multiple times and the fight organization was a pretty big failure. So, I ended up getting into business with some people here locally and then some people in Western Canada and then ultimately a group out of Las Vegas, which then subsequently ended up screwing us out of a bunch of money, and I was the one left holding the bag.
I would say let's put their names out there on blast, but it's okay. We forgive and we forget.
They know who they are. A lot of them are still in the game, which is interesting. And it's, I'm grateful for the experience that I had because it helped me learn what I didn't want. And I make the joke now, had I been successful at that business, I maybe would have been stuck in that industry, and I don't think that my life would have ended up as well as it has today had I been successful at that. So I'm grateful for the experience. I'm grateful for the bankruptcy experience because it teaches you that, a lot of people fear that like they fear death, and bankruptcy is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. I mean, fortunately for me, I was able to kind of dust it off and go back and erase it. But it's still a good experience. I think that it, turned me into the person I am today.
Wow. That's incredible, man. The way you say the word bankruptcy so loosely too, I can tell that word has no power over you.
No, it did for a really long time. It was, you're struggling through, being seen a certain way, I think is probably the worst thing because, first you're seen as a failure because people don't understand, the road that you took to get there. You're seen as someone who knowingly made a mistake of not paying taxes in order to, fund this thing over here. And I knew I was doing it. It wasn't like I did it by accident. I did it on purpose. And, there's a lot of, you're trying to learn how to run a business and build a business. There's a lot of things you don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't have the right people around you to tell you what you don't know, you've ultimately got to make those mistakes and then end up, learning from them and hopefully get on the other side of it and you can turn it into something positive.
Yeah. So when, after bankruptcy happened, what was the step after? Because I think that is a very crucial step, crucial part about your story. Because a lot of people watching this right now might be at that spot where they're like, oh my God, it's over. You understand? I'm embarrassed. I'm seen as a failure. What was your mind like? How did you...
Chaos.
How did you switch things up?
Desperation.
Chaos and desperation.
I mean, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I had a plan to figure out how to get out of the bankruptcy. What it is, and we've talked about this already, but
of course,
staying focused on what you know to be true. And in what I knew to be true about me was I knew I was trustworthy. I knew I had respect for people. I knew that I'm a hard worker, and I knew that I could work myself out of the situation that I was in. And I'd done it multiple times throughout my life, starting with leaving home early. At 16 years old, you've got no money, you've got no plan, you got to go finish school, I got to go get a job, all these things, you just figure it out. And this was just one more of those things. And, not to be flippant about the fact that a personal bankruptcy is not a big deal, because it is.
Yeah.
I just never changed the way that I was thinking about that. So during that time frame, so it was in 2014, during that time frame, life just in general was chaotic. And I think that points to the fact that if you don't have aspects of your life figured out, everything can unravel as a whole. But the bankruptcy thing kind of, that wasn't the the catalyst to what happened next in the year prior to the bankruptcy. Obviously there's warning signs, and there's either you're not focused on your health and you're working too much, or you're working 2 jobs and you're trying to run a business and you're working a job. And there are certain things that get left to the side, and concentrating on a personal relationship was certainly not a priority for me.
Of course.
I was still with women at the time and had a relationship, but it wasn't a healthy relationship. It was more likely toxic than healthy. And that's a big contributor to what took place. And then bad business relationships. So, you're in business with the wrong people, or you're turning a blind eye to things that would concern you. So if your gut's like, oh, I don't know if I trust this person, or I don't know if I feel good about this decision that we're making. It was kind of like a blind faith in moving forward. And looking back at it now, what it was my ability to understand without knowing that I needed to make these mistakes in order to get to the other side of this. So it was, even though you're in the moment, you're thinking, okay, this business is going to be successful, and it's going to be worth this amount of money, and I'm going to do all these great things, and people are going to love it, and it's going to be this cool brand, and it's going to be exciting, and everyone's going to accept it. You want to believe that to be true.
Course.
But looking back at it now, that was never going to be the case. Like it never had a chance. And it's interesting because I can look at things that I do now.
Is this was your fight promotion business?
Fight promotion. Yeah. It just, the market didn't exist here. We didn't have the money that we needed. The sport itself wasn't popular enough to
even with the
it.
UFC today.
The UFC, the way it is today, I mean, we're talking about 2010 to 2013, right? So we're talking like 15, 16 years ago. And it's way more popular than it was then. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of doing it at a time where, we were just ahead of our time. And, it's the model we built then is the model they use now to feed new fighters into the organization. So, I mean, who's to say that?
I know that's
thank God it didn't work out. That's what I can say right now.
That's true.
And, it could have been worse. The risk I took then, although it seemed huge from a financial perspective, when I look back at it now, I'm like, meh, that wasn't that big a deal. I take bigger risks now, but only because I've learned from the mistakes that I've made, and I've managed to surround myself with the right people who can teach me the things to not do. And, I still make mistakes now, but I make them in a different way. And they're far less invasive, even though they may or may not be larger from a financial perspective.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So what I got from that, correct me if I was wrong. First thing, your mind was chaotic when bankruptcy happened, but you knew from your past experience that you've had moments where you've always overcame. Mm-hmm. You've always like leaving home at 16 years old.
Well, I'll tell you what I did. So, I mean, not unlike leaving home at 16, what I focused on then was training, was fighting.
Wow.
And what I did immediately after the personal bankruptcy was decide to do a fitness competition, which, I mean, whatever your opinion is on that, what it did was it dialed in my discipline, and it made me focus on something else that I knew was going to take my attention away from all the shitty stuff that was happening, which was a big, I needed a distraction. I needed to kind of focus on me. So I needed some alone time, which was it was good for that. And then I needed to have a goal, and it was an easy goal, I think. You know what I mean? Like I can control the variables. I can control what I eat. I can control how much I go to the gym. I can pick the people that I put around me to help me do this thing, get the right coach, get the right dietitian, all this stuff. But what it did is it kind of just like refocused me on something that I saw as like an easy win. Does that make sense?
Wow.
So I could do this thing. I could feel good about myself, rebuild confidence, and then just, no plan moving forward, just figure out what happens after that. But I do know this, being in shape is good. It helps you see the world a little bit more evenly. I think that, looking back at the past years that I've built the most recent businesses, there's been some aspects of those businesses where I've been so focused on doing something that I've neglected my health.
Yeah.
And I can see how negative that is now. And, as we're piecing this all together, going back down the evolutionary train here, I see how important the physical aspect of it was. And now I've made that a cornerstone of what it is that I do today. I do that before anything else because I understand how important that is, because it puts me in the right headspace. And physically, you can take on more stress.
Steve, I'm going to explode out of this chair. I'm going to explode out of this chair. It's just when you were saying it, like, those of you guys watching right now, I want you guys to go back a few minutes, at least 2 minutes, rewind that, save it, and watch it every morning. He said in the middle of bankruptcy, a lot of chaos going on, he decided to get in shape, focus on one goal, limit his distraction, improve his discipline, and plus feeling good helps him mentally and physically, and he created small momentum with what he could control. That was a bar. Do you know why that is so impressive? Oh, why that made me almost nod my head out of this chair? Because I did the same thing about 4 years ago. Exact same thing. I was like, my wife is like, what are you doing? Same thing. I did a competition. Because what it does, it literally narrows down your focus and increases your discipline, and then you get momentum. That is incredible, Steve.
I think so. And I think, I used my friend as an example that's in the process of doing a fitness competition right now. I think that, depending on what your goal is, at the time I really had nothing to lose, right? It was kind of like a knee-jerk reaction to some comment somebody made. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do this thing. And it wasn't premeditated that I knew that if I focused on this, it was kind of like it was ingrained in me. I knew, again, to make the same comment, it was an easy thing that I could do. I thought that it would be an easy goal. I didn't really anticipate that I needed kind of a runway to get my confidence back and do all that kind of stuff. But what it catalyzed after that was, and we talked about this briefly before we started, but something happened, right? Just a random thing happened. And I don't know why and the timing of it. You look back at it now and think I got lucky or it was an accident or whatever it was. But a connection that I had from the past was involved in a business that I had no knowledge about, but I had a sales background, right? So being a promoter in the fight industry and being the merchandising company, I've always been good at being able to speak to people. And,
of course,
I'm a people person.
Oh yeah.
I'm a people person.
Oh yeah. That's what we're connected right away.
Most people probably won't say that about me, but I like to think that about myself. So they asked me, do you want to come do this sales position in this business that you know nothing about? And I'm like, I'm going to do that. So at the same time, during the same month, I met Crystal. And beautiful. It was kind of like I wasn't looking for a relationship because I had just gotten out of a really toxic, bad relationship. So it was kind of good timing for us because when we started hanging out with each other, it wasn't with the intent of dating. It was just kind of like, we're just going to be friends. We're going to learn a little bit about each other. And, I'm off doing my thing. I'm very focused on this fitness competition thing that I'm doing. But I'm also, by the way, I told her, that this is my history. I've got a personal bankruptcy and I'm quitting my job. I'm going to quit the only thing that's helping me generate revenue right now to stay alive. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go take a risk on this other business. And so I took a risk on that business in April of 2015 and then subsequently built that company with this gentleman into a company that we sold 18 months later in an industry that had just exploded during that time frame, which ended up realizing me my most significant financial win to date, which is a big deal. And I mean, it came out of nowhere. It didn't come with any kind of plan in place. It was just kind of like, you be in the right place, be prepared to take on the stress, concentrate on the right things, and just.
You got to share that story of I don't know if you're okay sharing it, when you walked in with a check to pay off.
Yeah. So we started that business in 2015, and then in 2017 we were approached by a larger entity that bought us out, and then they subsequently went public the following year. Is when I exited the company and sold all my shares and managed to back out of that industry. But in the year that they paid us our cash portion and our share portion before they went public, I took the check that I got from the sale of that company and wrote a check to the CRA for the full amount of the personal bankruptcy and dropped it off at the trustee and told them, here's all the money that I owe you.
Mic drop.
It felt good. She was shocked. She told me that she'd never seen anybody do that before. Like I say before, it was a point of pride for me because I wanted to be able to, at least for my own kind of well-being, I want to be able to, I don't like the idea that I would owe people money. I don't like the idea that I would be seen a certain way. And now when I tell people the story about the personal bankruptcy, it's not something I'm ashamed of because I used it as kind of a stepping stone to get to where I'm at right now.
Amen to that. And it's just that for some people, and I know a couple people that have been through bankruptcy, that story right there should fuel you that it's not over. Don't give up. You got to keep pushing, because Steve is a prime example how he found a way. There was a lot of, divine intervention involved at some point, but he worked his butt off to get to that point where you could write off that check and handle that. All right. So we've got into the point of this podcast that I'm going to ask you a series of 14 questions.
Sure.
And I'm trying to get the actual gems and juice from your story so that your success can be duplicatable for all of the viewers watching this, and including myself.
Sure.
Okay, these are selfishly my questions. All right, we're going to start off with the first one. I have it here because You know, I don't know it by heart. I play football, so there's CTE, so I'm going to forget a lot of stuff, right? Don't judge me. All right. So, Steve, what is the driving force behind your success as a CEO?
I don't like to lose. I don't like the idea that people think because of the way that I look and sometimes the way that I present that I'm not capable of doing big things. And I think that that's it's probably I don't know. I was bullied a lot when I was growing up, and then when I learned how to fight, that changed. And that the knowledge of understanding that you're capable of doing something, you know, whether it's physical or whether it's defending yourself or whether it's, you know, accomplishing something in business or taking a big risk that somebody thinks isn't going to pan out, but you manage to find a way to make it work. That's a point of pride for me. Like I think that that's probably the main driving force behind why I do the things that I do, because I can.
Wow. That, like, it's so profound. I just knocked my mic over. It's so profound what you just said, because I've heard that from other entrepreneurs too. Like they use other words like it's I feel like it's my duty because I have the skill set. And you saying bullied, there might be some young kids out there watching this that have gone through bullying or is currently going through bullying right now. You should be thankful for that experience.
Agreed.
Because it's the ultimate fuel. I got into fitness because I was bullied. I went to a Nigerian boarding school. I got beat up, and I went to my neighbors, and I was like, yo, you guys look jacked. Show me how to get jacked. And they told me, do this, do that, do that. This many push-ups, this many sit-up. And that sparked my love for fitness since when I was 10 years old. So it's crazy I could relate to that. That's incredible. Okay, you ready for the next question? Yes. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, man. All right, the next one I have for you is this, okay? How do you cultivate, this is a very important one. I'm very curious about this. How do you cultivate unshakable self-belief in your vision?
Well, I think cultivate's not necessarily the word that I would use. I think, you know, the most confident people in the world are still insecure about certain things, right? And I think a big contributor to my self-confidence and my ability to be able to take risks are, you know, the physical aspect of it, the fitness aspect of it. I think that having gone through so many painful things, both physically and mentally and financially, all of those things together, I feel like it creates a bit of a thick skin. So I think that, you know, understanding what you're capable of going through, when you look at a new endeavor, you look at a new risk, you're like, wow, this isn't as bad as some of the stuff I've already done. So, I mean, you know, worst case scenario, this doesn't work out. Here's where I'll end up. And it's still levels above, you know, the worst level that I've been to.
Wow. Yeah. So, you know why I love that? And this is one term I tell a lot of my clients and I use in my life a lot. And it's when you look to the past, you look to the past to pull courage. You don't look to the past to dwell. Because when you dwell, you stay there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But when you look to the past to pull courage, it can push you forward towards the challenges, through the challenges that you currently face.
Yeah, and if you're not learning from the mistakes that you've made and from the hard experiences that you've had, then that's a mistake. I think most people, you know, they learn as much as they can. Do they have to make that same mistake multiple times in order to learn that lesson? I think I see a lot of the people that are around me that I try and help make the same mistake over and over again. And you can explain the mistake to them, or you could expose the mistake and they can see it and they can verbalize it to you. They know they're doing it, but they keep doing it over and over again. And I think that every time there's been a real monumental success shift in my life, I've made a very drastic change, whether that's the change of a personal relationship or a change of like geographical location or just a complete like 180 from something I'm comfortable doing to something I'm not comfortable doing. It's always been a pretty significant shift.
Well, you said something here. This is just a sidebar question. You said, you know, people keep repeating mistakes and stuff. How does one, would you say from your experience, how does one break that cycle?
Yeah,
of
good question.
mistakes?
I think for a lot of people, I think maybe it takes something very dramatic happening in order for them to understand that they're making the same mistake again. And
like a great pain, eh?
Well, I think for me at least, the personal relationship aspect, you know, call it the 10 years prior to me meeting Crystal, I made the same mistake over and over again with the partners that I chose.
Wow.
And, you know, it got to the point where the personal bankruptcy existed. And then what took place after that led me to understand that, maybe this version of this person that I'm meeting, that I've been in relationships with for, 10 plus years, is the wrong thing for me. So that's maybe a good, more accurate example of, something dramatic happening. The personal bankruptcy was a big kind of shake up, obviously, because that's not something anybody wants to experience voluntarily. But I mean, moving forward from that, I made a list of things prior to meeting Crystal that I wanted in a woman, in a partner.
Like, you actually did this?
I made this list. And
you wrote it down?
This is a fucked up story. So I got this advice from a woman who was friends with the woman that I broke up with right before Crystal. And she said, you need to do this very simple exercise. She said, sit down and write a list of all the things that are your must-haves. So, doesn't matter. Be as frivolous as you want: hair color, height, weight, whatever. Put those things down, and then write down the things that you absolutely don't want, which you should have a good idea now based on the fact that you've gone through this cycle however many times, and then put a list of the things that are kind of like negotiable, right? So if it's this, it's fine. If it's this, it's fine. But the must-haves,
the fart a lot, that's negotiable.
And the absolutely nuts, yeah. But no joke, I built this list. I still have it on one of my cell phones. I'd have to look it up.
Are you serious?
I still have this list. I made this list, and I met Crystal the next day.
Are you serious?
Dead serious. And everything on that list was her.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That's crazy.
But having a focus, understanding what you want. Again, back to my point about not having a plan and not knowing what you want. This is a very simple exercise that I went through, but it just so happened that the very next day I met Crystal.
First of all, two things. All my single entrepreneurs, and I know a lot of them out there, guys, rewind that and actually apply that into your life ASAP, because that is one of the most profound things I've ever heard.
It's very simple though.
It is. And I know you're very smart, Steve, but I didn't know you were that smart. No, seriously, man. I know you're very smart, but I'm like, damn, I didn't know you did that. That's impressive.
And again, there's a certain amount of like knowing what you want and having a goal and setting up the whatever you need to get to that goal. But then there's also the luck involved in, or whatever you want to call it.
This whole time I thought your success was because of your good looks, but I guess it was just you. This is actually strategy behind a lot of this.
I mean, it depends on who you ask. A lot of people tell me I got lucky, and I mean, there's a certain amount of luck involved. But I mean, you need to be prepared to take advantage of opportunity, and a lot of people aren't.
Yeah.
So maybe I did get lucky. I consider myself lucky.
Oh yes. Yeah. If you guys see his wife, he's very definitely lucky. All right, let's go to the next question. Okay. Now, this is a very interesting one, and I think you kind of answered it, but I want to know your exact answer and perspective towards this topic. So do you use any affirmations, the vision board, visualization, or self-talk to reinforce your goals? Do you have that system in place?
No, I mean, there's a lot of that stuff out there nowadays. I feel
like a lot of woo-woo, yeah.
The thing that I've done consistently over the last 3 years is journaling. And at first when I started it, just like anything else, you're not sure whether or not it's going to work or what the outcome's going to be, but you try and have the discipline to do the thing that is an easy win every day, right? So I can do that. It's only going to take me 30 seconds. I sit down. I have 2 journals now. So I do one specific to my physical health. So I do I monitor my weight. I monitor how I slept. It's just basic stuff, not real data driven. I mean, it's getting more data driven now with the technology and stuff that's coming out, but I have that one. Time of year affects me here because it gets cold here, and, you're not getting enough sunlight, and I can't golf enough, and all these other things. So I keep track of it all. And it's been 3 years. So this will be my 4th year. And I also keep a journal on the daily Stoic side. So I use the daily Stoic journal too, which is, I mean, over the last couple of years, I've gotten into kind of following the Stoicism stuff a little bit more. It's not a, for lack of a better term, it's not religious. I'm not but it's a nice little tool to use every day that keeps you kind of in the moment and thinking about how things are going, instead of worrying about what's going to happen in the future and or stressing about the things that have happened in the past. To your point, it keeps you kind of focused on what's happening right now, right? So it's for that 15 minutes every morning, I sit and I know the things I'm going to write down on the physical side, and then I know the things I'm going to write down because they're prompted in the book on the Stoic side. And it's interesting because I've used the same book 2 years now. So the first year I just went through and did the single Stoic book by itself. These last 2 years I wrote in the morning reflection, and then I left it for this year, the evening reflection, so I can go back every morning now and I can look at what I wrote last year, same day, and I can compare it to how I feel today. how things are going. And there's a lot of consistencies. And the thing I like about it is that there's enough data in there now over 3 years that I can go back and I can look at cycles. So I can recognize patterns now in how I felt physically, what was happening in my life from a business perspective, where the stress levels were at, what level of success I was attaining in each moment, how hard the struggle was, all these kinds of things. And I can pair them against, I can lay them over year, and I can gauge how much I'm progressing. So the personal development aspect of it is a big deal for me, because when I was younger, I struggled with, anger issues, and I was arrested half a dozen times and fighting and all this other stuff, and it's not the type of person I wanted to be. And I think that in order to break that cycle of behavior, I needed to really, I had to have enough discipline to get into tracking if I was getting better.
Wow.
And the financial aspect has allowed me to better focus on my mental health and my personal development, because I'm not out there stressing about having to go to a job 9 to 5 or getting up at 5 in the morning and going and working outside for 12 hours a day. Like, all these things that I've got the luxury now of not having to experience allow me to be able to better focus on those types of things. I feel like had I concentrated on those things earlier in life, maybe it would have been success earlier, but maybe you're not prepared for success earlier, right?
Exactly.
Maybe it all happens. I'm a big proponent of it happening when it's supposed to happen.
Yes, me too. And by the way, guys, I'm drinking this. This is Rad Soda. It's Steve's company. I love it. It's my favorite. I just had to have a sip of it. No, I love that. I love that you stated that. And journaling, that's interesting. I got a funny question with this. This doesn't have to do with the questions I have now. My biggest curiosity when people tell me they journal, do you lock it in the safe? Because I'm like, man, if I'm journaling,
no, I carry it around.
You just carry it, anyone can open it, read it.
Shit, they won't be able to make sense of what's in there.
Yeah, you're writing it all
That's
sideways.
Yeah, I've got little books everywhere. We talked about this.
Yeah.
I've always got something I can write with. For whatever reason, I can retain information more when I'm writing.
Yeah.
And the journal stuff is, it's very basic stuff. Like, there's no intimate aspect to what's going on in there. I mean, those self-reflections in the Stoic book, they can be personal, they can be basic. They're whatever you want them to be in that moment, right? So it depends on how you're feeling and what's going on in life.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's definitely a habit I'm adapting from you. I'm stealing from you 100%.
It's such an easy thing to do.
It is. It is. No, I love that. Now let's jump to the next question I got for you. Okay. Now, what specific skills or knowledge have been crucial to your success? Like, what specific skills do you possess, or knowledge do you have right now, or you've always had, that has been crucial to you being successful today?
From a knowledge perspective, you learn something every day. The second you think you know everything about your business or you know everything about life, I mean, that's a pretty big mistake. You should never think that, you've got it all on lock. And I think that probably drives a lot of the reasoning behind why, I don't participate in some things that could potentially be beneficial to me. I mean, I try and stay away from things that will draw too much attention away from the things that I think are important. So I think that's a really crucial part of knowledge that I apply to everything that I do now in every aspect of life. So, like, for example, if it's, Steve, can you come do this one job? This is the criteria. We need you to do these things. And I think, could I do that? Yes. Do I want to do that? Well, is it going to take away from me being able to pay attention to my physical health? Can I still train when I want to? Am I going to have to spend less time with my wife? Am I going to have to travel for work? Am I going to have to do all these things? And there's a checklist there. And if those things don't align with how I want my life to be now, because I've worked to get it to this point, then I don't do those things.
Wow.
That's an easy no. So the knowledge that I've attained in the time that I've been an entrepreneur has allowed me to be able to make better decisions about how my future will look. And, that's all the things that come with that, the people around you, the experience that you've got, the success and the failures that you've had, they're all contributing to that. I think that my ability to be able to read people and or be transparent, you don't oftentimes meet people that are as upfront about stuff as I am. Like, I don't really care if everyone knows everything about me, because I feel like my personality's always been like that. I feel like it's better that everybody knows what's going on with me, and how much money I got and where I'm doing. And I mean, I'm sure I should probably be a little bit more secretive, but I really don't give a fuck, to be honest with you. I'm like, I would rather someone know me for me and who I am and how I'm going to present than try and fake and be somebody else.
Yeah.
We mentioned this before. The more I climb the corporate ladder now and the more I understand how big a fucking scumbag some of these guys are at the high level, it makes me not want to be that person. Like it allows me to be able to realize that I don't want to attain this level of wealth and status and stuff. Now, what I want to do, I want to do it my own way. I want to be who I am and do that as me, not as somebody else.
Yeah. I think that was the thing I found extremely impressive about you when we first met, was how transparent you were and straight. I was like, yo, that's interesting. This guy's just upfront, and I found that very interesting.
Well, yeah. And the aspect of wanting to help people, the firefighter EMT thing, that exists today. Like, I want to help people. I've got a group of men around me that I try and help from a business perspective all the time. I try and give them as much advice as they'll take. And I'm not saying that the shit that I say is the right way to do it all the time, but I'm saying this is what works for me. Yeah. I do this thing. I see some patterns in the behavior that you're doing. Maybe you should change some shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I mean, take my advice or not. It is what it is.
Of course. All right. Now let's jump to the next one. Okay. Now, how do you leverage creative thinking to solve problems or innovate?
Interesting. I can give you a very specific example. So I like finding people. I like contacting people when they don't expect to be contacted. I like starting a conversation from scratch. It's like, it comes from my sales background, but when I was doing the fight promotion, I had to subsidize the ticket sales and the revenue for this business. I had to sell corporate advertising, something I'd never done before. And it was terrifying to me. So I had to come up with a package of advertising that I just made up. Here's what you get for this amount of money. And I had to go to businesses and I had to knock on the door and I had to talk to the fucking guy in charge. And I'd be like, I need you to give me $10,000. And they're like, what for? And I'm like, well, this is the thing that I built and I need you to advertise with us because this is the exposure your business is going to get. So I had to do it from scratch. And I've since honed that skill, and I've got an innate ability to be able to kind of like reach out into the world if we've got an idea. Like, let's say, for example, we want to talk to somebody famous, or I want to be in a room with somebody where I can get a connection that normal people can't get. Like, for example, my wife and I are going to go sit in the front row at the Apex for the UFC fight night on March 15th. And I oftentimes find myself in those types of situations where I'll meet somebody that ends up being a fantastic business connection. And this just happens over and over and over again. And I'm anticipating that night will be, lucrative in a way where we'll meet some people. But I like to put myself in scenarios where I've got the opportunity to take advantage of those types of things and have conversations with interesting people. And so I kind of think outside the box from a creative perspective and try and think of the most creative way to try and get the thing that I want. So first I come up with the idea, we want to talk to this person. So let's say it's Dana. Well, it doesn't matter. I could talk to Dana. I just got to figure out how to do it. You got to talk to the right people, get the right place, be in the right spot at the right time. Yeah. I don't know. It just is, I'm good at it. I don't know how I'm good at it, but it just manages to just present itself to me all the time, which is
all
good.
Right.
I enjoy it.
I love. I can tell you, dude. I see the way you're bubbling talking about it. Now, this is just a side question with that. What do you? Because I do know a lot of some guys that are on the spectrum and are extremely intelligent at what they do, but might have a tough time starting a conversation, understand? But they have the wit, they have the understanding to hold a proper conversation, but they might, be a little bit trepidatious to put themselves in those situations. What do you say to them, and how can they step out of that zone?
Yeah, you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think, one of the most valuable things that I learned through the sales process and teaching myself how to sell and teaching myself to be comfortable, having random conversations with people and expecting them to say no. You have to find a way to be comfortable being uncomfortable. This is the best way.
You have to find a way to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, you got to do the hard thing. If it's really hard and you think you don't want to do it, that's the thing you should probably do.
Wow. I love that.
It's a lot like exercising.
It is. I tell a lot of people, the gym is almost, I see it as a metaphor, a mirror for life. Like whatever goes on in the gym, if you quit early in the gym, if you don't set goals in the gym, if you don't challenge yourself in the gym, it literally correlates to what is happening.
We're also quitting on yourself, and you're teaching yourself that it's okay to quit on yourself. And the more you teach yourself that it's okay to quit, the easier it's going to become to quit. And then you're never going to be able to accomplish the thing that you want.
Yeah.
You got to do the hard.
You got to do the hard.
Always. If there's anything I don't want to do, that's the thing I should do. And I procrastinate like everybody else does. You know, I'm no different than anybody else when it comes to the regular human actions of not wanting to. Confrontation's one that I think in my early years I would kind of revel in confrontation because I was that type of personality, right? I'd rather get it out. Like if me and you had something going on between us, we're talking about it. There's no way we're just pussyfooting around that. Like I'm gonna confront you. And if I don't like it, or if you disrespected me in some way, or you owe me something, or it's like, there's people out there right now that owe me money. And every single fucking chance I get, I make sure everybody knows about it. And you want to know why? Because the day I run into the guy that owes me money, I'm going to say the exact same thing to him. Wow. And he's going to have to answer for his actions.
Oh yeah. With love and peace and tranquility.
Yeah, so excuse my language.
Wow, kumbaya in that circle.
It just is,
I know.
It's back to the respect thing, right?
Of course.
You know, when you try and help somebody and those people try and take advantage of you, there's no respect there. And I've got no patience for no respect. I have respect for everybody that I interact with until they show me disrespect. And then I'm definitely not the right guy.
Yeah, for sure. Respect and loyalty. 100%. All right. So you told me how you how you leverage creative thinking to solve problems, right? Like talking to Dana White. Now, the next question I have for you is, how do you approach strategic planning in your company? Like right now in your companies, you have multiple companies. This one I'm very curious about. How do you, I hate having meetings to have meetings, or having meetings you left, you like, we didn't solve shit. How do you create that?
Yeah, I hate meetings too. Again, it's being transparent, it's being upfront, it's confronting the problems head on and having the hard conversations that people don't want to talk about, or they want to talk circles around, you know, how are we going to solve this? What's the plan? How many people? No. Why don't we just simplify this? This is the problem. Here's the solution. Who's going to do it? Like I'm very to the point.
Who's going to do it?
Yeah. Who's going to do it? Is it me? Is it you? Like I oftentimes now, like I've gotten to a level in business where employees or people that you're working with, like I'm in more of a management or mentor role now than I was before. So, you know, I've always been comfortable being the guy turning wrenches, for lack of a better word, right? I'd like to get my hands dirty. I like to be on the floor. I like to do the work. I like to see something get built. I like to create stuff, right? But what I've had to learn, and this has been one of the most difficult things that I've had to evolve into over the last couple of years, is maybe that's not where the best use of my time is anymore now. And based on the experience that I've had through failing and succeeding, now maybe the best use of my time is from up here. Now I'm watching the guys on the floor, making sure you're holding people accountable and making sure certain things are getting done, because my level of expertise has gotten to a point where my best use of time, the most valuable return for me is going to be doing it from here as opposed to doing it from on the floor. I use the on the floor metaphor because it's a rig thing.
Of course. Now, when did you come to that conclusion? Like how did you, because a lot of entrepreneurs, we all like grinding in the beginning phase, like you've been through, right? When do you start thinking, you know what, my time is better here than just being hands-on every day?
It wasn't even like I didn't decide that. It was kind of decided for me.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. And I mean, without getting into the details about how it was decided for me, it was again attached to the fact that the health aspect had suffered so much, and I wasn't necessarily in tune with that, but there were people around me that were in tune with that, and to their credit said, hey, listen, maybe you need to go over here for a little bit and go do this thing and kind of figure your shit out before you burn out, or before you're no use to anybody at this point right now. And I kind of took offense to that. I was like, but I've got the gas tank to go do this thing. Like I work harder than everybody else does. So explain to me how that fucking works. Like how do you not have the guy who's working the hardest on the floor doing this stuff right now? And they're like, it wasn't really explained to me as professionally as it should have been. But what happened was I kind of got, stomped my feet. I'm like, fine, fuck you guys, I'm out of here. So I went and like spent some time by myself for a little bit and figured out, health's messed up, personal life's disjointed. I was away from home for a year, and to Crystal's credit, I mean, I told her I'm leaving, and she's like, when are you coming back? I said, when it's finished. So
she's such
again,
a G.
to speak to the fact that you need a good partner in your life, I mean, she was a huge contributor to that. But when I came home, everything's fucked up, right? And then you got to figure out how to get it back in line. And, you start with the health, and then you fight with that for a little bit. And then you're fighting with, I'm not working anymore. So am I driving any value, or how am I generating revenue, or am I having enough positive impact on it? All of those things are just a whirlwind of shit that you got to the personal development aspect of it has allowed me to be able to stay disciplined and understand by tracking the data here, you are getting better, things are getting better. But as more opportunity comes to me and I start to learn how to be this new person, I realize how much more valuable that is to the things that I'm doing, because I can see that manifest in the success of the businesses that I'm in charge of or that I'm involved in.
Wow.
And so I'm not necessarily the guy affecting the business on a day-to-day basis, but what I am is I'm the one pulling the strings from behind the scenes going, all right, we need to make these big macro moves now, and we can't do it. I can't do it on a basic level anymore. And I think a lot of mistakes made by entrepreneurs, they'll fast track that. They'll like, oh, I'm going to delegate and I'm going to have these guys do this business for me. And I'm going to be the manager. Right. And I didn't never want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the guy that went to the manager role too soon. But I think the way that I transitioned out of it and the circumstances by which it happened were probably beneficial in that way for me, because I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
I was resistant to it. And then when I finally got there and I got left to my own devices for a little bit, I was like, maybe this is the place for me. And then I feel like you can grow into it a little bit more effectively.
Yeah.
But I continuously watch guys around me. They're like, oh no, I'm just going to get somebody else to do this. No. You need to do this now. This is you. You need to do this. You're the one that needs to grind right now. You're not at a point where you don't get to grind anymore. And the world will tell you, depending on what you watch on the internet,
Of course.
oh, you got a 4-hour work week this, and make sure your life balance is that. No, it's all bullshit. If you want to do something big, you got to make some significant sacrifices. And life balance and vacations and fucking birthdays and all this other stuff, that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist until it exists. And I'm not saying that's a healthy way to do it. I'm just like, not everybody who's a multimillionaire is a healthy person.
Of course.
There's a lot of guys that are, worth hundreds of millions of dollars that are so out of shape, they're not going to be able to experience life with that money. I didn't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy that makes a bunch of money and then I die. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to die.
Yeah.
I just don't want to die early.
Yeah. Of course. It's you know what? I see it like it's phases, right?
Yeah, seasons, I call
seasons, them. Seasons. You could call it that too, right? In seasons, what season is this? Am I in the building phase? You understand? But the biggest thing is you cannot neglect, and I think that was the biggest part that I got from that, is that one, you had a kinship of people that probably didn't tell you in the nicest way, but knew you well enough to be like, hey, man.
Well, I think it was probably sparked more so from the negative potential effect on the business. And whether or not the opinion about that was right, doesn't matter. The circumstances that took place, I mean, I'm grateful for it now.
Of course.
I didn't like it in the moment, but I'm grateful for it now. I look back at it now, and I think that's probably one of the greatest things that ever happened to me.
Wow.
Just like the bankruptcy. I mean, it's hard to see when you're in the shit.
Oh, yeah.
That it's not a thing that's happening to you. And I think that that's also taught me that moving forward, when something really bad happens to me now, I actually revel in it, because I'm like, this means something good's going to happen.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard to have that mindset.
It is
unless
so
you've
hard.
been through enough shit where you're like, oh.
It's kind of scary though. It's like you got to go through enough shit to experience that good shit.
Yeah. People think it's just all sunshine and roses all the way to the top. But
Oh, no. No sunshines, eh?
No.
Some roses.
And where's the top?
Where is the top?
Where's your top?
You have to create your own top, right?
Correct. And so many people don't even know what they want. How the hell are they going to figure out where the top is?
Wow. You dropping a lot of bombs. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting this to be this good. I'm like jumping. Now, the next one is this. What process do you follow to make quick decisions?
It's easy in the process itself, I think now, but I think to get to this point was not easy. I think now I just go with my gut, which sounds like a very, overly simplistic way to describe it, but if it's the right person, if it's the right idea, if, there's a 50-50 chance it could be successful, it's easy. Just go. And I think that making the decision to just, like we talked about before, execute on something, even if it's the wrong idea, there's going to be benefit from it. So if you just go, if you have 70% of a plan and you just go, it's going to work.
It's going to work.
Just
go.
Yeah. You've got a higher win rate if you just go than you do if you wait until you get to 75 or 80%. Because in that time frame, you could have either missed an opportunity, or maybe your mindset's not right, or maybe you learned something that maybe changes your idea. Doesn't matter. I mean, whether it's right or it's wrong, just go. Just send it.
Just go.
I mean,
send it.
The amount of times I've just sent it and things have fallen apart are countless. But within that fall apart, there's all these little gems of like gold where you get them and you're like, okay, cool. I'm not going to do this next time. Or next time I send it, I'm going to do it just slightly different because this was the end result of that one. And I mean, I'm sure if I thought long enough, I could give you some specific examples.
Oh, exactly. But you said you go with your gut. Now, what do you say to someone, and I've experienced this before, where you don't know what, you can't listen to your gut because life, maybe you've taken a few L's, you don't, like for yourself, right? With the fight promotional business, the apparel line, all of that great stuff. Your gut was like, this is gonna boom, and it didn't boom.
I think that the sense I use becomes more tuned the more mistakes you make and the more you learn about people. I think that one of the things I struggle with the most now is, do I take a risk on this person that shows me a bunch of these red flags when my gut says no?
Wow.
And I like to look at people. You mentioned this before. I like to look at people, and I like to see the things that I recognize that they do well. And I like to kind of extrapolate that out and think, if this person could only X, they'd be able to Y. You know what I mean?
Course.
And more often than not, how that ends up is I try and give this person an opportunity. And there's only been one real outstanding example of me giving a guy around me an opportunity who's managed to be able to take the ball and run with it all the way up the field and score a touchdown.
Really?
But one is better than none. And I'm going to continue to make that decision to try and help the people around me because it's who I am as a person. And I'd like to see, my own personal experience in being able to accomplish what I've accomplished is doable by anybody. Anyone could do what I did. You'd be in the right place at the right time, work really hard, be a good person, don't screw people over, try and put good out into the world, and the world's going to give it back to you. Wow. I believe that. And I think that, yes, Crystal gives me shit all the time, but why are you doing this with this person? Or why are you doing this with this person? I'm like, listen, there's something in this person that I see. I don't know what it is. And I think that they're good at this thing that I'm not good at, or that I'm good at, and I recognize they're good at it. And I think that given the right set of circumstances, this person could make something way better for themselves. Yeah. And more often than not, it's a person who's in a really shitty position in their life and they want to make a change, but they don't know how to do it. And I try and, the idea behind doing a podcast and all this other stuff was meant to try and create something like that, because telling my story, I don't know who it's going to help, but maybe it helps one person. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if I'm seen a certain way, or if people don't like the way I present or whatever it is. I don't give a shit about that. I mean, my life's for me, not for them. Yeah. And if I can try and help as many people as I can on the way up, the analogy, you got to send the elevator back down. Like you said, that some of these guys think that they're beholden to the universe because they've got the skill set that they're required to do this thing. I think that there's a certain aspect of that involved, but I just like to help people. I like to see people succeed.
Amen to that. I love that. Me too, man. Me too. Now, you love to see people succeed, but how do you stay persistent when facing setback and failures? Like, I've already asked you 1,000 times, but I think it's so impressive to be facing all the stuff you're facing, bankruptcy, a lot of personal stuff going on, and you were still persistent on, you know what, I'm going to get it. I'm going to make it. I'm going to push through. How were you persistent through all of that?
It's the not losing thing again. I mean, I'm stubborn, I think. I don't like to lose. I really don't know how to answer that question in any more detail. That's an interesting question. It's a very simple question, but that's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever thought about that before.
Oh, yeah? I got another follow-up question to that. What daily habits keeps your determination in that state of being unbreakable? What daily habits helps you stay grounded?
I mean, without question, like training my body, pushing myself to a physical limit. That again, it's doing the hard thing. Rogan said this before, but I mean, you feel better about who you are as a person when you can push yourself through something hard. And I think fighting taught me that at a really young age. So my stepdad was the one that got me into karate originally, which was what led to Muay Thai. And the discipline behind that, and understanding that you now have this like skill set where you've got the physical ability to be able to assert yourself on another human being. You're given
whenever you say that, you've said that previously, this conversation, it sounds like you're about to get up and do something, right? Like you give me that look like assert yourself.
but it builds your confidence, right? So it helps you understand that in any scenario, like, and I appreciate this about my personal relationship with my wife too, right? Like we talk about this all the time. she's an attractive female and she doesn't get any unwanted attention that in public if she's with me. And I like that because that means I'm her protector, right? Like I can, but I've always felt that way about myself too, right? Like there's no scenario where I feel uncomfortable with another man in a room, like not from a financial perspective, from an intelligence perspective, or from a physical perspective, and certainly not from a physical perspective. And I think that back to one of your other questions, what is it that builds that confidence? I think that having that knowledge that you understand how to use your body, that you're in shape, that you can push yourself to a limit, physically and mentally that most people can't go to. That's a superpower.
Wow.
But that's a daily thing that you have to use the discipline. I mean, another really basic example is if I see somebody that wants to do business with me and you're 200 pounds overweight, I'm like, what else is wrong in your life? Maybe that, and I mean, that sounds like a bit of a condescending comment to make, but it's true. I mean, when you see someone who takes care of themselves physically, you know that there are certain aspects of their personality that are high quality, right? You know that, they've got discipline, that they understand how to manage their time. They all these things. And those are tells you don't really have to have a conversation with somebody. You don't have to understand what their daily habits are. You just already know.
Yeah. And for the people watching right now that might be out of shape, and maybe that person that's overweight and you want to do business, and the reality of life is that, and don't take this to heart too. Like, if this is what I'll tell you. And I started telling myself this just to tag on with what you just said. If you hear something and it strikes a chord in you, always ask your question, why? Always ask yourself that question. Why are you, if you're watching this right now and he said that and you slightly got offended, slightly got emotional, ask yourself, why am I offended or emotional? Is it what he said, or is what he said true? The truth pierces through reality. And you felt that. And if you felt that, it's not over. Like we've said, don't give up. Start small. What is your 1% today? What is your 1% you can do today? And like Steve just said, daily habits. I asked Steve a question on confidence and he pointed right to his physical daily habits, because that's what is helping him stay persistent.
Or get really good at golf.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. It's also a fantastic business tool.
You know what? That is actually, I hear it so much. Why is golf the sport that everyone is running to?
I'll just tell you my own personal experience with it. So I played a little bit when I was a teenager, but not like, we couldn't afford to play golf. So I wasn't playing golf. And when I say teenager, I'm like 13, 14, maybe played 1 summer, 2 summers, but then just never played again until 5 years ago. So as part of the comeback from the move out of the operational side of my business, and the physical aspect, the doctor said, you need to find something that can de-stress you because your stress levels are too high. I was 200 pounds, which, to put it in relation, I'm 230 pounds today. So
guys, you can't really tell because he's covering the guns. Steve is a big guy.
But 200 pounds was very unhealthy. So do something to de-stress. So I Googled what to do to de-stress, and golf was the first thing that popped up. People laugh when I say that now because they're like, golf's one of the most stressful things I do. Like, why would you do that? But what it did for me is, as soon as I started to get into it, it sparked something not unlike fighting for me. It was difficult to do. It's difficult to do well. And then understanding how difficult the journey from like starting to getting really good was going to be was enticing to me. I was like, oh, I can do this. Like, I can get really good at golf. So when I started, obviously I sucked. And I mean, I play well now. I'm a 5 handicap now, which is, I mean, if anybody knows anything about golf, that's a pretty significant shift.
I don't know shit about golf.
But I do, like, this is one of the things that I do on like almost a daily basis. So I'm in the process of putting a simulator in my house right now.
Oh yeah.
But I also live close to the golf dome, so I practice 2 or 3 times a week. I've got a standing 2-3 rounds that I play on the simulator in the wintertime. We're moving to Vegas for a month so I can go get a kickstart on the season. But I've taken it and run with it because it's become such a useful tool for me from a business perspective. The people that I get to golf with, the relationships that I build golfing, so either get in really good shape or get really good at golfing.
Yeah. Okay. So I take that back. Stay fat and start golfing. Moral of the story. Now, this you already said a point when this kicked in, but I don't know if you were referring to this, but do you have, or did you have, a network or group of mentors, advisors you rely on through the journey?
Nope.
No?
Nope. And that was probably, if I had to do it all over again, I would find people that were doing things at a level. And I would use the skill that I talked about, being able to find people and talk to people and just start a conversation. I would find those people and I would ask them, how do I do this? What do I do here? You know, and even now, the guys that I do have around me are very knowledgeable, and the value that they drive is, you know, it's substantial. And I rely a lot on the people around me now to make the right decision. So even though, you know, I've learned what I've learned independent of these guys, now having a good group of people and good minds around me that have done bigger business deals, older guys, younger guys. Like I golf with a gentleman who's in his late 60s, super successful lawyer here in town. And I get a lot of information from him on, you know, how retirement looks and how his life looks and how he got there and all that kind of stuff, and really valuable advice on how I should be structuring my financial investment stuff and all this, like shit I didn't know before. Which banker do you go to? You know, how do you like buying a house, like all this other stuff, shit that I had no idea how to do, that I just had to kind of fumble my way through.
And you met this guy through golf.
Through golf, yeah.
Wow. I'm picking up golf in this summer.
You should, yeah. It's
fantastic.
fantastic.
I'm going to pick it up. I'm coming over there and I'm going to show you guys what football guys could do.
That sounds good.
The golf I've just played.
I think it's a great idea.
Now, how do you channel personal energy and drive into your business success?
Yeah, it looks different now. I think because I'm away from the businesses, I spend a lot of time at home. So I've got, you know, an office set up, do a lot of Skype stuff. I try and make sure that I touch base with everybody personally. So I try and build a personal relationship with each of the people that works with me on top of the business relationship, which sometimes gets a little bit convoluted, right? Because think friends versus working for or working with, it's kind of gets messy. So I treat every different relationship, you know, in some kind of way to try and get the end result the best we can, depending on that person and what we're trying to accomplish. But I think that being transparent and having them understand who I am and what's driving me and why I'm acting the way that I am, or why I'm asking for these things to get done, or what it is exactly that we're doing, I think is important. And, you know, a lot of times people don't understand why you're telling them to do something, or why the instructions have been given in a certain way, or they don't understand how I deliver my messaging, right? Because I can be seen as a little bit forward or aggressive or whatever you want to label me as. But yeah, when you realize that, you know, we're all the same. We're all trying to do the same thing here.
Oh, yes.
It makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, we're all trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, so I have a unique way of applying that into my day-to-day business dealings, but it seems to be working.
It is. I can tell it is. Now, this is an interesting one, okay? I have my own opinion on this. A lot of people know about the RAS, the reticular activating system in the brain, and how it works. But like, how do you train your subconscious mind to align with your goals? Do you even bother about this? Technically you did by finding a wife, actually.
I think that you kind of just, I mean, again, if you have everything in line as far as what you want, which changes as things progress, has for me at least, I think that, you know, your body just kind of goes on autopilot. And subconsciously, if you're doing the right things, I think taking care of your health, taking care of your personal development first and foremost, because you're becoming a better version of yourself, those things kind of just take care of themselves. You know what I mean? So so you're making a decision to have good habits, and those habits then ultimately manifest themselves into your subconscious kind of doing the right things. But I mean, the only reason I know that is because every once in a while you get off track, right?
Yes.
You know, you're not training for consistently, or the weather gets really shitty, or whatever, life gets in the way, or you get sick, or I mean, getting sick is one of the big ones, right? Because then you can't train for a week, or, you know, depending on how sick you get, can't train for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then life just kind of gets fucked up. You start eating shitty food. You're like, oh, I'm going to eat this because it makes me feel good, or I'm going to sleep more, or whatever it is. So that you kind of get off track. But I think that as long as you've got like a consistent go back, like a pattern that you get into, I feel like those things just take care of themselves.
Yeah. No, I think being consistent with your personal health and all that stuff, and it's one of the most common thing I'm hearing you repeat a lot.
Yeah,
like the importance of that. And I feel like every answer correlates to that, but it's very important for the viewers and myself watching someone that's successful, the key habits that's leading to their success and how it all works together in this scope. And that's why I love this podcast that we just started, right? The next question I have for you is like, what mental habits keeps you sharp innovative as a leader, right? As a leader in the leadership role that you're in all of your companies with Rad Soda and all the amazing businesses you're in, what mental habits keeps you sharp?
I listen to a lot of music, a lot of different types of music.
Oh yeah?
And I don't know if that's got anything to do with it, but I feel like that kind of keeps me, I have my go-tos, like the traditional stuff. And then, I like to build a playlist for training. I like to build a playlist for different types of stuff. If we're going somewhere, we're going on a different trip, I'll label it that way. And
Is
I
it
feel
Spotify or Apple?
Yeah, Spotify.
Please send it over. Send some of them over.
Yeah, I mean, you might not like some of it, but, country's become a little bit creeping in there every once in a while. Crystal's a big country fan, so I don't know.
Okay, don't send it over. Keep it.
Yeah, I won't send you those ones. And I think that, from a creative perspective, for whatever reason, music's always just kind of been on the forefront.
Really?
Yeah. And I like, the creative aspect of my personality, I think, draws me towards AI stuff and learning more about how the world's evolving and, the science aspect of everything.
How do you feel about AI?
I mean, I'm certain it'll be the demise of the human race.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I hope not.
You said I'm certain.
Yeah. I mean, it's already out of control. And I mean, the human race is so disorganized at this point. I can't imagine accelerating that in any way is going to be a good thing. But I mean, I could be wrong. There could be a version of the world where everything is just fine and corruption goes away and people just turn into everybody's good. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but
damn,
we're all going to find out.
We're going to find out. Yeah. Wow.
It's a good run. I feel like this is the best time in human history to be alive, though.
It is.
Although sometimes I feel like it might have been good to be in the Viking times because
really,
I just want to cut somebody's head off. It would be nice.
No, you're saying that now until you got to do it.
Yeah, that's right. It would be messy. I feel like if we grew up in that time, though, it would be more common practice, so it wouldn't be as difficult.
Yeah.
I feel like growing up in this time and then being transported back to that time, it might be a little bit more
that would be bizarre. You're like, oh my God.
Depends on the circumstance. I mean, if someone was, threatening my life or something like that, I'm sure I could probably do it.
Yeah, for sure. Do you that was a totally left topic right there. I like that. Talking about Viking time. Now, do you rely on intuition? You've said it. Do you rely on intuition when making high stakes decisions?
All the time.
All the time.
Every time. It's the only thing I trust.
And you're okay if it doesn't work?
Yep. I'll never look back at a circumstance having made a decision using my intuition if it was wrong and think that was a mistake. There's always some type of, reason or reconciliation that I can make, justifying making the decision with that. Mm. I mean, it's about not stressing about the things that you can't control too, right?
Don't stress about the things you can't control. That's a big one, man. That is a big one. During COVID, I feel like we all needed to hear that.
I struggled with that for a really long time. I still struggle with it now. It's one of my daily kind of it pops up in that Stoic journal every once in a while,
What, like struggling with the things you can't control?
Mm-hmm. I think it was written in my day today from last year.
Wow.
I can't remember what the affirmation was or the reflection was, but it said something about how do you manage whatever kind of stress. And I said, one of the things I wrote was, don't stress about the things you can't control.
Wow.
Well, for a really long time, I mean, even my businesses now, a couple of them are so far out of my direct control that if I take information in from whatever source, I talk to the CEO and he tells me one thing and I talk to one of the sales guys and he tells me another thing. This guy says everything's good and this guy says everything's shit. And I'm like, okay, well, which one's true? Which one of you guys is lying to me, right? But it's not necessarily that easy, right? It's their different viewpoints on everything and macro versus micro. And this guy likes to complain about stuff because he's a high performer and he likes to see solutions to problems and whatever else. But when I listen to the one guy, I stress about it. And then, I've since, over the last couple of months started to come to the realization that I shouldn't give that as much energy as I do because it just makes me feel like shit and it doesn't really accomplish anything. So why stress about the things I can't control?
Wow. I think that's a big one right there that I've had to work on for sure.
Easier said than done.
Oh yes. But the act of journaling and reminding yourself is a good way to at least spot the pattern. Then you can do something about it.
That's true.
And I feel like that's the same reason a lot of people don't do anything about their fitness is because they don't spot the pattern, right? And they think everything is okay until something tragic happens or something very scary happens, which I hope is not the fate or the case for anybody watching.
Yeah,
right?
And that's a struggle because, I mean, your health is one of the things that you can have the most control over.
Yeah.
Not in every case, but in a lot of cases, you can make a very positive impact on with such a small change in your daily behavior. So many people choose not to do it. It blows my mind.
Yeah, I know. This is a big one too. And I think this is why they choose not to do it. And it is a question on fear. And what fears have you faced on your journey and how do you overcome them?
I mean, the fear of failure is every day. The fear
Still now.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Now.
I mean, we made this comment before we started shooting here, but I stress about money the same way I stressed about money when I was bankrupt.
That's crazy, man.
So, I mean, just to put it in perspective, like more money doesn't necessarily, someone early days for me said that the only thing that more money does for you is it allows you to show up to your problems in a nicer car. Just true. I mean, people have problems all the time. Problems don't go away with more money. In fact, it could be argued that you get, I hate to say this because again, it's cliche, but there's a lot more shit you got to deal with. There's a lot more work. Like I never realized how much work it was to have more money until I got it. And I realized I had no fucking idea how to do all these things I needed to do. Like, how do I make sure it doesn't go away fast? Because as fast as it comes, it can go away fast too, right? Especially if you don't understand that it's a living, breathing thing that you got to pay attention to all the time.
Damn, you're not making it sound fun, man. You're like, yo, man. You're like, man, the more money, more problems, this, that. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not gonna say that having more money isn't good, because it is, because you don't have to stress about other basic shit,
basic stuff.
Yeah.
But
you still got to stress about stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
Not the least of which is having it and then being like, okay, well, how do I make more? Somebody asked me a couple years ago. I started going to this men's group. I don't go anymore, but one of the very first night I was in there, the guy asked me, he goes, so I told the story and I was searching for something. I don't know what I was searching for, but I got invited. I met this guy, good vibe. He's like, oh, I do this thing, come. He's got his own podcast. I'll send it to you. This guy asked me, he goes, well, you've got all this success. He's like, how much is enough? And I was like, oh, great question. I'm reading a book about that right now, actually. I can't remember the name of it, but it might be called Never Enough. It's called Never Enough. I think it's about a billionaire from Vancouver. Anyways, he goes through his whole story and talks about, you're always keeping up with the Joneses type thing, right? So, we moved into a more affluent neighborhood a couple of years ago, and I see it all the time. Like these people with their houses and their cars and their kids and all this shit, and they're always like, I got this or I got that, and look at this and look at that, and I don't like that. Like I'm terrified that I'm just in the situation I'm in right now, because I'm like, well, how do I do it the best way to set us up for like a life where Crystal doesn't have to work, or we can just go travel and live our life the way we want to. I mean, we're at that point now, but I still haven't kind of left the tree. I'm still hanging on to the branch. I'm like, I'm stressed that it's not going to work. I go through all the same shit that everybody else does. It's just at a different level. And it's not what people want to hear, but that's the truth.
I got a question for you. I've had a bunch of questions for you. I'm going to add on to all of it, but if you lost it all today, could you get it back?
Yes.
Then why stress?
I think it's a scarcity mindset growing up with no money and being broke and struggling and going through all the shit that I've gone through. You don't ever want to have to go back to that, because it means that you maybe let yourself down, or you made a mistake that, crossed the boundaries of what you deem as important in life, and you've made a significant mistake. And I've set myself up now so that won't happen. Barring any unforeseen massive fucking world catastrophe. But I mean, it's a lot of work. I feel like the best way to answer that is that I don't want to have to do the work again, because it was fucking exhausting.
Damn, I love that. I love it because you really highlighting what it truly takes. It was, the work was so painful and exhausting. Well, like, I don't want to go through that shit again.
No, it just about kills you. And I mean, the idea of, let's say, if I went to zero again, I know I could tomorrow walk outside and go work a construction job, and I don't want to work outside because it's cold as shit outside.
Yeah,
I don't want to have. Like, I'm almost 50, so I'm like, my hands hurt. I don't want to. I don't want to have to do all that. I want to go golfing. I want to go golfing. I want to reap the rewards of the work that I put into this point. And I feel like I've got the ability to be able to set the table to be able to do that for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I don't take any unnecessary risks, even though I'm still active in the investment realm. You know, I'm still involving myself in different businesses. I mentioned before, I'm now trying to reposition my involvement in businesses to be more of like a board type role that invests in the business, and then I can benefit the business with my skill set unique to what it is that we're doing. So I try and find things that I can actually actively work on. But I also only want to actively work on them in the fashion that I want to work in them, that allows me to do all the rest of the stuff that I enjoy doing. First and foremost, my exercise schedule, making sure that I can stay on track with my diet, that I don't have to travel all the time. There was a point where I was building the first successful business where I flew 157 times in a 12-month time frame, and the amount of physical
157 times,
the amount of physical strain that puts on your body, I would never want to do again. So the idea of flying all over and jet setting and all that kind of, for the first couple months I was doing it, I was like, oh my God, I'm a businessman. Look at me fly. And then I'm like, me, this sucks.
Really?
Nobody wants to fly this many times. No.
Wow.
No.
Wow.
That was a bit surreal while I started doing it, but then it became old real fast.
Wow. That's awesome, man. Steve, I want to thank you for just being so transparent and sharing some game with us. And if you could leave us, the entrepreneurs watching right now, and all people that are workers, you know, if you could leave us with one simple game, right? And you imagine you're talking to the young you, or the you that is going through bankruptcy or whatever. What is that statement you could say, or what is that gem we could apply today that could help us make it to tomorrow, or go even further? Yeah,
I would say that you know, you're your best advocate, and you're the only person that's going to be able to save you from an inevitable failed life. Meaning, you know, invest in yourself, invest the time in yourself, invest the effort and the sacrifice in yourself first before anybody else. Because if you can't get better and be the best version of yourself, you're going to be of no value to anybody else. You're not going to be good for a partner. You're not going to be good for a business partner. You're not going to be successful. No one's going to want to take a risk on you. You know, you've got to present the best version of yourself, regardless of what your circumstances are in the moment. You have to show up to the world the best you possibly can to get the most out of what the world's going to give you.
Wow. And how does one do that? What is one way one person could do that?
Well, you got to have a hard conversation with yourself. You got to find out whether or not your daily habits are contributing to the goal that you've got in mind. You've got to make sure that you're treating your body properly. You got to make sure that you're treating your mind properly. What are you reading? Reading's been a big one for me. I would say, you know, over the last 2 years, I've probably read, 100 books, which doesn't seem like a lot to a lot of people who read on a regular basis, but it's new for me. And I think that, you know, the amount of lessons that you learn hearing other people's stories, which is why I think what you're doing is so important, because, you know, for a long time I thought no one wants to hear what the fuck I have to say. Like, who gives a shit, right? I don't want to be seen as this guy that's trying to tell people what to do. But telling my story, when I tell someone who's really interested in it, someone who actively wants to change their shit, it's a valuable experience for me because they get something out of it. And it makes me feel good because I get to tell them, this is just what I did. Like, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you what I did. I think that, you know, the reading aspect has been a big value add for me, but it also kind of shines a light on, you know, the other work that you're doing, right? Are you working on the personal development stuff? Are you keeping track of your data? Are you tracking whether you're getting better, right? And I mean, you know, it can be as simple as a weight loss thing, or it can be as complicated as, you know, am I taking the necessary steps from an experience and education and networking perspective to get to this level of this thing that I'm trying to accomplish, whether it be business or money or whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Steve.
Hey man, this was good.
Guys, make sure to go follow Steve on Instagram and support Rad Soda, you know, Canadian owned. You know, we gotta show our brother some love. And I just want to thank you for sharing game with us. For the viewers watching, make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, stay hard, stay strong, keep pushing. Let's go.